My beloved people, first of all this morning, I wish to point out to you that under normal conditions, now we're getting back to the normal schedule after having been interrupted over the Easter season, next Sunday is the first Sunday of May, and there will be no Mass here as like usual. And the Mass instead will be in Montgomery. And I point out to you also that until the next time that I see you, that concerning the feast of the Solemnity of St. Joseph. Now, there are two ways that this is observed in these days and times, and after checking the various and sundry traditionalist calendars, I see that both are observed for one reason or another. Normally, it is in the old Missal, the feast of St. Joseph, the Solemnity of St. Joseph, was always observed on the Wednesday following the second Sunday of Easter. Now, in the New Missal, or in the New Missal since about 1955 or thereabouts, St. Joseph the Worker was placed on May the 1st. So, and the feast of Saints Philip and James, that was transferred to May the 11th. So, it's a matter of free choice, it seems, depending on which way you want to look at it. And to keep from going back and forth on this, we just simply settle on observing the Solemnity of St. Joseph on May the 1st. And we should use this day, we should keep this day as very, very special because it is St. Joseph. And we should do something over and above the normal dispensation of prayers on that day in honor of St. Joseph. So I encourage you to pray to St. Joseph in a very special way. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. My beloved people, the gospel today has to do with the Good Shepherd. As a matter of fact, today is referred to as Good Shepherd Sunday. We very often hear the same presentation year after year. And sometimes we may come to the conclusion that there is very little new to say. The priest, the preacher, from our Catholic pulpit, should not be looked upon as a lecturer, as one who year after year, day after day, Sunday after Sunday, presents a new and improved and different lecture, picking out the various and sundry subjects that lecturers can pick out. That is not exactly the position of the priest. The priest is not a lecturer. He gives lectures at dinners and at conventions and such like. But at Mass, there's something different about the priest who is speaking to you. The priest is presenting, or should present, a simple message. And what is the simple message? The salvation of our souls. The message is so simple that if you really wanted to get to it, you could probably put it all in one or two paragraphs. Because there's very little else to say about how to save one's immortal soul. But in those two little paragraphs, something is presented that indeed causes us a great deal of concern and a great deal, or requires a great deal of effort on our part, because the salvation of one's soul, though simply presented, is not quite so simple in its execution, because in its execution we have to contend with our own will, and our own will prevents us from seeing the face of God. Now, this is something that we want to see. We want to see the face of God, because seeing the face of God selfishly now, and we're being selfish, we want to see the face of God, but we will never see the face of God until after we've gotten rid of the devil. You cannot see the face of God as long as the devil resides in us. This is not to say that we will not suffer temptation, because we will. This is not to say that we will live a life that is simply, that we must live a life and turn into a life that is never, the feet never touching the ground. That's not true. But it does indicate that we are living a life, that we have committed ourselves to a life of trying very sincerely, very definitely, a life that is dedicated to the expulsion of Satan from within us. And of course, this can only be accomplished by our constantly fighting and trying to keep the will subdued. Because the will it is that is inclined to sin. And the will it is that tries to work very hard to keep us from incorporating good. For some reason or other, if you have to choose between that which is good and bad, our will, for some reason, is constantly more inclined to select that which is bad or evil. So, using our own intellects, our own reason, we must work to keep the will in check. And this is not easy, because the will is in constant rebellion. Constant, night and day, the will is in rebellion. The will does not agree with the reason. And of course the reason, which we know, which is improved upon and added to by our own studies and by our own prayers, the reason tells us when we must stop, when we must stop giving in to the will. But today is Good Shepherd Sunday. This is the day in which we call to mind our blessed Lord's love for us. This is the day when we call to mind that our blessed Lord's love for us can only, he couldn't if he wanted to, he could not because of his love. His love for us can only, his concern for us can only keep us in an area which is safe. Our blessed Lord is not a hireling. A hireling, as we heard this morning, a hireling is concerned only to the point of where his safety might be at stake. And as soon as his safety is at stake, he is going to leave, regardless of what he is committed to. And if anything at all, the hireling is going to be friendly to the wolf, lest the wolf attack him. And he's going to present himself in a pleasant way to the wolf, even at the expense and the cost of the lives of the sheep. But the good shepherd is only too willing to give up his life for the protection of the sheep. We are the sheep. So therefore, let us trust in the Good Shepherd. Let us trust in our blessed Lord. Let us trust that Christ's regulation for us can only be for our welfare. The pastures might be greener elsewhere. It could possibly be true. But the greenery could be poisonous. And he leads us away, and it's his business to know that which is nutritious and that which is poisonous. And so it is his business to steer us away from that which is poisonous. We must trust the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd can only tell us that which is good for our own benefit. We must pray that our will be able eventually to understand the direction that comes to it from the Shepherd, from Christ, from our blessed Lord, who has demonstrated to us very clearly how willing he is to give up his life for us, because he just got finished doing so. He didn't have to. Nothing said that he had to give up his life, except that it was the will of the Father. So let us understand this. Let us understand that spirituality is a simple message. It isn't sophisticated. It isn't complicated. It isn't hard to understand. It isn't hard to grasp. The problem is not with the life of spirituality. The problem is not with the principle of spirituality. The problem rests with me. To what extent am I willing to agree? To what extent am I willing to put forth the effort that is required for me to become a saint? I am put here for one reason only, and that is to become a saint. There is no other reason for my presence on this earth. No other. And therefore, I must put forth the effort for me to become a saint. You cannot make a saint of me. I cannot make a saint of you. Only you can make a saint of yourselves. But this requires effort on your part. The priest can only bring the regulations. The priest can only present the pattern. Then we have to follow it. If the pattern has been presented and we fail to follow, then we're culpable. It requires effort, not only to listen, but more so to do. And this comes from a lifetime of effort. You don't make the effort once, and that will do for the rest of your life. Day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, must this effort continue. And it does not become easier simply because one has reached old age. It does not become easier. As a matter of fact, I might suggest that the older you get, the more difficult it becomes, because old age sometimes can be the ground for more pride, because knowledge sometimes, experience sometimes can be a hindrance. Where it is a help, it can also be a hindrance, and it can make one proud. So the struggle continues until the last breath. Do not think for a second, my beloved people, that it becomes better as the days go by. The Good Shepherd must watch over us until that last breath. And we must be totally dependent on him at all times and all places with total and complete trust, my beloved people.